I'm Isla Scritchfield.
And I'm Audrey Scritchfield.
Won't you help a child in need this holiday
by donating to Playtime Project?
Hey listeners, once again, my family and I are collaborating with Playtime Project to help bring much needed toys, family goods, and love and kindness to over 400 children who are experiencing homelessness in DC this holiday season. Visit playtimeproject.org to learn more about them, or go right to their wish list at wishlist.playtimeproject.org. Now it's easier than ever to scroll and see what items are needed in order to help these families have a safer and happier holiday season. This is the third year that our family has been supporting this organization, and I promise you that any effort you can make to support them makes a significant difference. The mission of the Homeless Children's Playtime Project is to cultivate resilience in children experiencing family homelessness by providing and expanding access to transformative play experiences. And we know that this makes a significant difference in the well-being of children's lives. Again, that's wishlist.playtimeproject.org, and you can grab a link for that in the show notes of this episode. Thank you so much, and
Happy Holidays!
That was me smashing a stack of scales with friends, and I recommend everyone do it. And while you're at it, break up with all the other scales and judgments that are holding you back and creating a happier and healthier life by building self-compassion in place of shame. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield, creator of the Body Kindness Philosophy and the book, which offers dozens of reflective prompts, infographics, and spiral up activities to get your brain focused on what really matters to you. Not a diet plan or set of elusive rules that you're used to getting every time the conversation of weight comes up in your life. My goal with this podcast is to have interesting and important conversations about why body kindness can feel so hard and why we need a new, inclusive definition for health so that everyone can heal. And we stop judging ourselves and other people as not good enough, and hopefully be the kind of compassionate and inclusive people the next generation needs us to be. You are not a project to complete, and your better life doesn't start after you've achieved some list of expectations. It starts by being good to yourself right now.
Some of those thoughts are helpful and some of them are not, and it depends on situations. And so it isn't even a simple thing like only believe these thoughts, don't believe that thoughts. No, sometimes even self-criticism has a place. Of course it does. The problem is if you just turn it over to this mindless, automatic, push, pull, click, click, whatever shows up in your mind thing, well, man, you've got things in your mind from, critical things said to you by parents or friends or siblings or lovers or, or yourself that know full well when I follow that line of thought, I'm in trouble. What are you going to do? Argue your way out of it? I mean, you take something like a negative thought. The mind turned loose on it will say things like, well, don't think that thought, or you're stupid to have that thought. Why did you have that stupid thought? See, you can't learn the simplest little lesson. You read the book, you know better. Why are you doing? And you're right back into the same thing. It's just another round, right?
Well, that was Stephen Hayes. He's a Nevada Foundation professor at the Department of Psychology at the University of Nevada. He's also an author of 45 books. Yes, 45 books and over 625 scientific articles. He's the developer of Relational Frame Theory and has guided its extension to acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT. This is a popular evidence-based form of psychotherapy that is now practiced by tens of thousands of clinicians all around the world, including me. Dr. Hayes has been the president of several scientific and professional societies, including the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies and the Association for Contextual Behavioral Sciences. He was listed by the Institute of Scientific Information as the 30th highest impact psychologist in the world. And Google Scholar citations place him among the most cited scientists in the world. He's received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies and is a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, among numerous awards. And I was so honored to have the opportunity to talk to Dr. Hayes to explain how ACT really came to help me in my personal life when I became a mom of 2 young kids, when I was working on the body kindness philosophy, which is deeply informed by acceptance and commitment therapy. So if you remember the PACT skill, it comes from ACT. And I just really hope that you get something beneficial out of our conversation. I really did love his book. It's called A Liberated Mind. And you get a lot of backstory, personal memoir. He talks about how he struggled with anxiety, and you get a sense of how ACT came to be. You get practical tips and information. The one little heads up I want to give has to do with a very small section about weight and weight concerns. In the book, there are some things that are very weight normative to me. They're not health at every size focused. And so for me, it's just not helpful. So I'm redirecting myself away from those few pages, but the rest of it really is very helpful. And actually in this podcast chat, you're going to hear us address how actually when they changed ACT to be weight inclusive and actually basically not focus on weight, but focus on shame resilience, they got much better well-being outcomes. So I think you'll find that very interesting part of our conversation. And toward the end, we really talk about what we could all do better as a culture and a society and as a planet to be more connected human beings. And I really just appreciated this time that Dr. Hayes gave me, and I hope that you get something positive and beneficial out of it. Before we get into the chat, I have 2 quick reminders. One is that if you're just getting started with your body kindness journey, I want to make sure that you get my free guide. It's bodykindnessbook.com/start. And when you give your name and email, you'll get a free video, some reflective tools, the first chapter of Body Kindness. If you haven't yet read it, you can get that book wherever books are sold. Lots of reflective journaling prompts that can really help you break free from diet culture. So again, bodykindnessbook.com/start. The second, I'm really excited to share that Glennis Wayston and I have partnered in the first virtual support for people with diabetes or diabetes concerns. It is a combination of passive education modules that you can do on your own time with reflective guides. I kind of like to think of it as like body kindness for someone who has diabetes or diabetes concerns, but that's not the official title. It's actually self-care for diabetes. This will be live very soon. So if this is of interest to you, the best thing that you could do is leave your name and email at hayescare.com. That's HAESCARE.com. And you'll get more information about the launch. This does include a 3-month membership plus live chances to talk with Glennis and myself and a chance to connect and support with others who share your concerns and who are looking for a body positive and weight inclusive approach to looking at their diabetes concerns, whether you have a family history or a diagnosis. So again, that's hayescare.com. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the show. Hey, Stephen, welcome to Body Kindness.
I'm glad to be here with you, Rebecca. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Well, I really love to start the shows by letting my guests know how I came to find out about them and how they came to become a guest. And so for you, it's actually a really interesting story. I am a dietitian and I counsel people on healthy self-care and well-being. I ended up accidentally getting in the field of eating disorders and never looked back. But at eating disorder conferences, ACT has been something that I had heard about several times early on in my career, attended the sessions, felt like this makes so much sense. I love mindfulness. I love the idea of acceptance. And it all resonated. But when something else significant has to happen before it really clicks for you. And that happened to me. To the point where now I use ACT in my counseling writing. I've even done your clinicians course that you have that I hope we can talk about too. Oh, I was like one of the first ones to sign up for that. But what did it for me, it actually was my own struggle as a mom of two. I was adjusting to that. There was an adjustment of 0 to 1, but especially 1 to 2 because they were 19 months apart. It was like suddenly nothing I did was good enough anymore. So I didn't know how to do with feeling tired with 2 kids and the division of attention with 2 kids. Frankly, it's like this is not, I wish I wasn't a mom, but it's like, it felt like a life interruption. But then I felt guilty that I was complaining that my life was being interrupted. There were all these voices in my mind. Everything was changing and I had to prove myself, right? I can handle this, which led to just a lot more hustling and shame and everything. It was like, I go, I was a runner, but if I could go and do the stroller or baby wearing thing, I was like, well, that's not running, I'll never run again. And so I was in this mindset, never really felt worse about myself or what I was able to do for myself. Obviously I wasn't sleeping right. I'd be like, oh, I don't really feel like cooking today. We'd order pizza. I was like, oh, I could have done better, And so just all these different polices and voices and I've had an inner critic before, really thought I overcame it, but it was just this new type of struggle. And I think one of the worst ones for me especially was, so I have a weight inclusive practice and so focus on positive body image and just focusing on well-being and whatever your size is. And I really thought I'd worked through all my own body relationship issues. And like, here I was also like not letting myself appreciate my post-baby body or just these harsh criticisms. And it was just like a rock bottom moment. And I remembered what I had learned about ACT. And I was like, I think I need to do ACT for myself. And I need to find a therapist that can help me with ACT because I know that these voices aren't helping me, but I just can't get them to shut up and I don't know what to do. And really, I learned how to become my own caregiver again and just made ACT an integral part of my practice. And when I wrote about when I wrote the book Body Kindness and about body kindness as a practice, ACT was this thing that I was like, this is what people need to do to integrate their caregiver voice with the things that they can't control around them when they're looking for everything to fall in place. So honestly and truly, I want to thank you for being alive and for creating ACT because I know you really helped me turn an important corner of my life. And I know that you saved a lot of people from unintentional suffering.
That's an awesome story, and I'm here with a friend and a fellow traveler, and people come into these cul-de-sacs in different ways, and it's not a problem. The problem is, can we learn from it, and can we find out what's inside that? And if you do, then you end up that gets integrated into a path of prosperity. It's the noticing the voices within, that kind of chatter. Argument. I call it the dictator within in this new book I've just finished. If you handle it correctly, the things that feel like they're the most problematic, stressful, difficult, etc., are actually just a door into a territory where you get to be more whole and free and live the kind of life that you want to live. So different cul-de-sacs can take you into it, and if you handle it incorrectly, you're going to suffer a long time until you find the way forward. For me, it was an anxiety disorder. For other people, it's an addiction issue. Sometimes it's a body issue. So people are struggling with eating disorders. There's a way forward. I almost said a door out, and that's not the way in. It's more like a door in that allows you to move forward and to have that be part of your journey and actually lift you up instead of pushing you down.
Oh my gosh. So first, okay, I'm glad we're already into metaphor. I love the cul-de-sac, right? Because I see that, oh, there's a turn, right? You feel that there's a sense of agency. Ooh, I've hit a point, it feels like a dead end, but actually I can make a turn. And even though in very much my mind would say, oh, well, there's a turn and that's the way out, I actually really do appreciate this idea to reframe it more as a way in. Because I think, well, like, what do most of us say? How do we know that we're healed, right? Because we ended it, we're out of it, and that's not necessarily true.
You start listening to your language and you start saying, well, I'm over it. I got past it. I got through it. Wait a minute. No, it's more like getting with it and then being able to carry that as part of your journey, because you don't want to forget. You don't want to forget the lesson that you learned. If you think back over your life as to what are the really important moments, I bet you that some of the things that come to mind are really sad, really difficult, really challenging moments. And so what do you mean getting over or getting past? It's getting with, but getting with in a way that isn't a heavy burden you have to carry for the rest of your life. But it's something more like it's with you and in you and helps direct you towards what's of importance. The way I say it, it's like pain and struggle becomes a flashlight into the darkness. If you know what's inside the pain and you learn what the energy was, what you really wanted out of that, and turn your attention towards how to accomplishing that instead of just following the dictates of this problem-solving voice, which is a one-trick pony. It's great when you're doing your taxes. It's horrible when you're trying to find peace of mind and purpose. It's inert. It's pathetic at that.
Yeah.
And we rely on it so much because we're in this instrumental world where you have to do all these problem-solving things. Well, but then you hit things where, you start turning yourself as a problem to be solved. And you're not a math problem. I mean, you're more like a sunset than a math problem. And so how can we get into this other mode of mind that everybody knows and everybody has, which is you have the part in you that knows full well when you see a sunset to just say, wow, and appreciate it, and not say, but it needs a little more pink. But when you're dealing with stuff inside, you're going like, I want that one to go down and this one to go up and this one to go away and this one to come in. And in all that chatter, you're losing your touch with the present moment you're in. You lose touch with the felt sense that your own history gives you in your body, in your emotions. And you start becoming stupid about or ignorant about what you've learned from your past history. So can we take what you've learned and channel it towards a life worth living? And in A Liberated Mind, this new book, I've walked through how to do that, essentially how to find prosperity inside pain and purpose inside the cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, let's start talking about it. Although I'm already getting a nice little list of questions for you. So, so this is your latest book. It's called A Liberated Mind: How to Pivot Toward What Matters. And it's a proven plan to overcome negative thoughts and feelings. But basically, all my clients are already looking for that, although they want them to go away. So we should probably talk about that. But turn your pain into purpose and build a meaningful life. And, even the impact that you had on me was when I really stopped and asked myself, what am I doing anymore if I'm not going to put people on diets, if I'm not going to collude with diet culture and shame? And it was like, I think I'm going to help women create a better life. And that was like directly from, this is what ACT stands for. My life is getting better. This is, I think, what many people need. So I know you love this book. It's personally meaningful to you.
Yeah, it is.
Why are you so excited about it?
Well, this is kind of the story of a 40-year journey. It's my personal journey. It's a science journey. It's a journey of a whole community of people, including thousands of clients around the world. And I tell a lot of client stories. And what I'm excited about is, one of the things that Western science can do, I know the eyes roll up in your head as soon as you start talking geek talk, but is that you can pull complexity at its joints and simplify it. So this is the simple story. This is the 20% that does the 80%. There's only 6 things you have to keep in your head, these flexibility processes. And if you learn how to detect when they're going awry and move them in the right direction. That metaphor of a pivot is how to take the energy that's taken you in one direction and turn, just like the pivot in a hinge, turn that energy in another direction. And that's what I do in the book. Once you learn that, the cool thing about it is that I show in the later part of the book, it applies to almost everything, because we took the time on that 40-year journey to drill down to the pivots, the way that we talk about in the book, that make a difference. And it turns out it's not just in eating disorders. It's not just with weight shame. It's not just with anxiety or depression or substance abuse. It's with how good of a parent you are, or can you run a business, or how good are your relationships, or can you be a competitive runner, or because your mind is going with you everywhere you go. And it's only too happy to tell you it's got the solution. It's even who you are. And if you don't do what it says, you're going to be in trouble. And sometimes that's right. Sometimes you need to rein that voice in and find another mode of mind, this sunset mode of mind, this observe and appreciate, open up and carry with mode of mind. And when you learn that, then you get that little third sense that, I'm getting hooked again. And you know the tools to slip off that hook, show up and reorient towards what's of importance here. And it's like a dance. And when you learn the dance moves, yes, sometimes you'll maybe get a little off and the rhythm's not there, but you learn the dance moves, you can find the rhythm again in sort of situation after situation after situation. And it's an exciting story. I think somebody said it this way. I was on a podcast, actually. Somebody said, I think you've cracked the code. And I think we've cracked the code. I mean, it sounds arrogant maybe, but the we is thousands of people over 40 years figuring out how we can pivot towards what brings purpose into our lives. And cracking that code is I'm on a kind of exciting journey of helping people by helping them liberate themselves.
I mean, who doesn't want liberation, right?
Yeah. And we're living inside these little cages, and it turns out the cages are like printed on rice paper. I mean, they look like they're iron bars and you're stuck. It's a complete illusion of mind, delusion of mind, really. But you can't solve it just by saying, "Oh, that's not right. You need to do this." That's talking to the same organ that got you in trouble in the first place. You're going to need the whole of you to put your mind on a leash. The mind is not going to do it willingly. It's not going to just tell you, "Oh, here's where the little hook is, put the leash through there." No, it's not. It's going to tell you, "I've got the solution, just do this." And it'll turn out it's more of the same, or a different version of the same thing. And more different and better of the same thing is going to give you what you've got. And if you do what you do, you'll get what you got. And if you're not happy where you are, let's do something really different. Let's put our mind in a different place so we relate to it in a different way. I want it. I want to be able to use it, but I don't want it to use me.
It really is. It's about relating to your mind. And that, so when you talked about like getting hooked on your thoughts and like noticing like, oh, there I am. I'm hooked again on this fear-based, negative thought or this criticism. And that takes practice just to even notice without judging. And I think one of the things is, and it's certainly like when I was at that rock bottom, like pushing the baby in the stroller and this isn't enough and you're never going to run again, that kind of talk. It was this, it literally sounded like me. It sounded like me. It was me. So for me to kind of separate myself and say, okay, so this is what my mind is telling me, and it's not necessarily helpful. I think that difference was pivotal for me.
Well,
in being able to notice it, right?
It is pivotal. And and what you caught in there is the difference between what's workable and all your thoughts lined up in a row like some sort of neat little obsessive desk rearrangement or something. What's helpful, some of those thoughts are helpful and some of them are not. And it depends on situations. And so it isn't even a simple thing like only believe these thoughts, don't believe that thoughts. No, sometimes even self-criticism has a place. Of course it does. The problem is if you just turn it over to this mindless, automatic, push, pull, click, click, whatever shows up in your mind thing, well, man, you've got things in your mind from, critical things said to you by parents or friends or siblings or lovers or, or yourself that know full well when I follow that line of thought, I'm in trouble. What are you going to do? Argue your way out of it? I mean, take something like a negative thought. The mind turned loose on it will say things like, well, don't think that thought, or you're stupid to have that thought. Why do you have that stupid thought? See, you can't learn the simplest little lesson. You read the book, you know better. Why are you doing? And you're right back into the same thing. It's just another round, right? So we have the capacity as whole human beings to do it. I'll give you an example in the book. Can I give an example that listeners can use?
Oh, totally. I'm looking for lots of examples. I've got my own bended pages.
This is kind of a body example. So I know body kindness. It's well, let's let our body tell us something. And I put in the book because I say something like, in 2 minutes I can prove to you that you know everything that's in this book. It's just that your mind doesn't. And I say, think of something that you struggle with that's really difficult, that's been around for a long time. Look around, nobody's watching. Put your body in a shape of you at your worst with that issue. What I mean by that is like you're a sculptor and you're like now a statue in a garden, and you're trying to put your body in a shape so that if somebody walks by, they might look at that outside you and have a sense of what the inside you is doing with you at your worst with that issue. And I ask people, I do this in workshops and stuff, but I have them close their eyes because people get embarrassed. But if you're reading a book, you can do it, pick a private time. Literally put your body in that shape, like dramatically, because you don't want people walking through a sculpture garden and not understanding you. And then I say that, okay, now the same issue, same exact issue. Put your body in the shape of you at your best. You at your best with that same issue. And people have variation. They see it. There are times when they're getting hooked, times when they're not. Well, we've done this study. We've taken pictures of hundreds of people around the world in all different kind of cultures, wearing burqas or not, like that. And here's what happens. I bet you if the listeners did this, even if you did it mentally, you at your worst, your eyes closed, your head came down, your arms and hands came in, you folded over, you went into a defensive posture, you may have fallen on the floor. A few people will clench their fists and get up and get ready for a fight, but it's some version of flee, fight, flop, and fail. It's some version of that, bodily expressed, okay? You at your best, your head comes up, your eyes open, your hands unclench, your arms go out, you might stand up, you might look around. Well, what are you saying with that? Let's unpack it. You know full well already, even before you read A Liberated Mind or any of these books walking through these processes, that for you to be defended, closed, and cut off in consciousness, to be unaware, inwardly focused and defending, is toxic. You know full well if you can open up your consciousness, open your eyes, lift your head up, if you can put your arms and hands out free, that where you're able to move and attend to what's of importance and bring your behavioral capacity, that metaphor, bring in your hands to it, that allows you to sort of bring your heart to what your eyes show you and bring your hands to what needs to be done in a way that's not defensive or fighting or flopping or failing. And so how you do that, rein in the mind, learn the skills to be open, aware, and actively engaged. And those are the pivots that I walk through in the book. And the science shows, we're like 3,000 studies and 300 randomized trials into it, that it's helpful everywhere that a human mind goes. So if your mind's there and you're doing it, it's helpful. And how? Let's work it out. I in the book, in the later chapters, I walk through about the example of body kindness, for example. I know I'm on a rant, but can I do a thing that's directly relevant to body?
Totally. I'm into the rant. You have my full permission.
Well, I did an early trial on ACT back when I first developed it. using ACT for working with weight control.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with Kelly Brownell, one of the best known people on the planet, one of my best friends. We were interns together, and there's cool stuff in there, but I was not happy with it. And actually, ACT was helpful, helping people stick it with their diet and exercise, but there was something missing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I put the trial aside. In the last 15 years, I wanted to go back to it. And I said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to work on shame.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Lewis, a student of mine at the time, who's now kind of expert in this area, said, put me onto it. So we did this randomized trial, and here's the only thing we worked on. You had to be in some sort of weight-related program, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Could be exercise, whatever. But what we're going to focus on, that they didn't know that till they showed up, is all we're going to focus on is that voice within
Mm-hmm.
that shames you about your body.
Mm-hmm.
We developed a measure of weight-related shame. We developed a measure of weight-related acceptance and psychological flexibility, which is our name for all these pivots. And not a single word on how to stick to a diet, exercise, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Quality of life goes up, shame goes down, psychological flexibility goes up, and oddly, people do start exercising and eating in healthier ways.
Mm-hmm.
You get out of your way
Mm-hmm.
and kind of let these healthy things happen in an organized way, but not a finger wagging way, not a shame and blame way.
Yeah.
So, the reason I got to that is in this conversation is that it turns out these processes, sometimes you have to get to what's clear, like the shame related issue with regard to dealing with your own body is key. In other areas, maybe not. I mean, other areas, it's following through with your values or knowing what your values are, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that these flexibility processes empower people across the whole range of situations that people face, and that's what's in the book, is the data on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some things that really resonate with me with that. I tried my first diet when I was 9 years old, and a lot of my experience, my intent was health. I remember feeling my heart could beat. And I was like, wow, your heart's going to beat till one day it doesn't. And around 8 to 9, we know is developmentally appropriate for people learning about death, know? And so I was like, I care about health. And unfortunately, I was just influenced a lot by the magazines, thankfully it's before social media and all that. But, there was a lot of diet culture messages that I was absorbing and just getting really confused with health, right? So sometimes I'd be really into certain exercise things. And it was like, yeah, I thought that I might have a future, this is still in high school, right? But I might have a future as a personal trainer, but then I'd read something in Fitness Magazine about long and lean. And fast forward to that when I hit my diet rock bottom and I was like, I don't ever want to diet again. I've seen it not work in my family. I have clients crying who are marathon training and I gained a couple pounds on Friday night pizza night, and it was just watching all this suffering. I was like, I don't know what to do to help people who never want to diet again, but I know I need to figure it out and I have to figure it out for myself too. And that was, you talk about life pivot, major life pivot, but based on your story, and I think shifting the focus to shame. So whether I do private or group work, I fully expect weight concerns to show up at all sizes and abilities and ages. It's a societal thing, how we value people. And so I make room for the weight concerns to exist. I don't want to shame them before they even come in, right? But you're right. It's like when they can you know how you use the metaphor about drop the rope in the tug of war with their mind? When they can drop that rope around my body is not good because, and whatever comes after that. If they can drop that and let them have other reasons why they care about movement and even other things outside of health, right? Playing with kids, just those reframes that help support the shame resilience. It's that is where I have also seen suddenly what we might say, yes, doctor, healthy habits, clinically is they're doing them because the shame of I'm not good enough or my body is a problem, at least from within, they're able to change that relationship. Clients still very much struggle with our cultural message around what bodies are more valuable than others. And I hope to see a better body positivity movement and that change, because it really sucks, right? It's like when someone's being good and they're on a certain diet and that's the only time they're buying vegetables. And when they're done with the diet, it's like, oh, now vegetables symbolize not only just me being good, but me never getting to enjoy chocolate cake again. And so realizing that I'm not the problem, it's the thing that I was trying to do. And so anyway, I can just, speaking of rambling, I can just really relate to the way that you were able to shift that focus into shame resilience or addressing the shame and releasing from that, and then focus on behaviors and habits. I mean, that is, for me as the well-being clinician and, with what I know about nutrition and dietetics, and as an exercise physiologist, I do some work around anxiety as well. It's like they're all linked and integrated because we're humans in the world. And it's when people aren't doing the self-care habits they want to do, a very important missing piece is the fact that they just don't think that they have a right to show up and be a beginner, or a right to show up in spaces and learn and grow. And sometimes they're getting that message. Like I'm thinking of like gym culture. Like we want to be in gyms where we know we're going to be welcome and included, even if we don't know much about exercise. And so I hope to see more of that coming. And that's why I also think that ACT just really helps people engage in a lot of healing type work, because that fundamental relationship with yourself, there can be so much pain in that.
Yeah. This, the root of the word heal is whole. And how can we come in as whole human beings, whole and free? The cool thing about the journey that you're on, if you're dealing with for example, how to let go of shame and to show up as a whole free human being with the body that you have, is that the struggles that you have been in contain within them the seeds of something that will be really useful to you when you have 2 new kids, or when you have relationship issues show up, or when you have a health challenge and doctor walks in and lays a difficult diagnosis down on the table, or life is not sugar soup. It's going to give you challenges, and that's cool. Mm-hmm. Can we do something with our moments to create a culture in which we're supporting each other and walking through a life in a way that is about something bigger than ourselves, kind and empowering and supportive of ourselves and others? And, you look at what young people are being exposed to, and you mentioned these messages in the media and so forth. They're exposed to this constant flow of pain and judgment and comparison. Mm-hmm. And that's the toxic triad. You put those 3 things together and you're on a route to serious struggles. I mean, and so, young people have anxiety, depression, substance. It's a standard deviation higher than it was 30 years ago. And it's not, don't tell me it's a self-report, because suicide rates are going up. Mm-hmm. There's actually, like, the body count is telling you something's wrong. We're creating a world where it's, by prosperity measures, I mean, in terms of having enough to eat, are you going to be exposed to violence, et cetera? On every measure, it's better than it's ever been around the planet. Wow. We're less violent. We're less starvation, and at the very same time, more misery. I mean, what's up with that? Something's wrong with that. And we can't accept that as the answer. We got to do a better job. Mm-hmm. And it turns out some of the stuff that's in our wisdom traditions, our spiritual traditions and so forth is part of the answer, but we're going to have to put it into people's hearts and minds in new ways in the modern world. And so the exciting thing about it, if somebody's listening and thinking, yeah, I'm not sure this applies to me because, mm-hmm. And then you start listing your mental problems. Right inside those problems are the seeds to a life of prosperity. If you can dig down to what did you really want? Why are you not getting it? How could you get out of your own way and use getting what you really want as the measure? I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so if you're running away from difficult emotions, what do you really want? What your mind tells you is you want to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
What your heart tells you is you want to do a good job of feeling. How do you know that? Because every single emotion your mind tells you is bad. You pay good money to produce. You read the tearjerker novels. You ride the roller coasters. You watch movies that have embarrassing episodes as the core of them. I mean, you take any emotion, you pay good money to produce it in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Under smaller doses, right? But it tells you want to feel, and you want to feel the whole range of it.
Mm-hmm.
You come in that way. Look at what a baby does. Look at what your young kids are doing. And they're out there exploring and feeling and tasting and smelling and licking and, almost to the point it's unsafe. No, don't put that in your mouth. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and so how did we grow up to like at this age saying, oh, I only want to feel good.
Yeah.
Some package that way. If you look at your children,
Mm-hmm.
I bet you feel this rich soup of love, and there's a little bit of vulnerability there.
Mm-hmm.
What if they got hurt? Mm-hmm. What if somebody took them? What if somebody harmed them? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Is there any parent who doesn't have that package? No. If you're a good parent, you have, what is it? It's the package of love and loss.
Mm.
And what is that? That's what love is. Love doesn't come just in the sugar soup form.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you care about somebody, you could be hurt. I got an email this morning from Sweden where a dear friend of ours, and a person who's been essentially an honorary grandmother to my son who's 14. And I know he's had a severe stroke, and she may not make it out. She's had a series of health problems. She's 80 years old, loved dearly by the whole family. We went over and visited her just to, it brings tears to my eyes just to think of this email I got this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my little guy is going to just suffer horribly when he hears about it. And why? Mm-hmm. Because we love her. That's why. Mm-hmm. If you don't want that emotion, don't love anybody, and see how that works out. Mm-hmm. See how that lifts you up. And that's what the mind will do. It'll say, I just want to feel good. What we do in the ACT approach, what's in A Liberated Mind, is how to shift it from feel good to feeling good.
What's the difference there? Feeling all your feelings, and that's good?
Doing a good job of feeling. Okay. Because that was the yearning. That was why. I mean, why did you think anxiety was such a problem? Because you didn't feel as though I could feel this and still feel. Mm-hmm. And so people, let's say if you're betrayed in love, immediately your mind says, I'll never be so vulnerable again. Right? Mm-hmm. I'll back up. I'll put a wall around me. That'll be the solution. Well, wait a minute. The reason why the betrayal hurt is because you wanted to be in a committed, a loyal, intimate relationship. Are you going to be in committed, loyal, intimate relationships if you put an armor suit around you? Mm-mm. The answer is no.
Nobody can touch you. You're defending yourself from connection.
You did what your body did in that little imaginary, statuary garden. You said, okay, the solution is, the way I say it in the book, is like a thirsty person who brings a glass of ice water to their mouth, and it slips out of their hands and crashes on the floor, and they say, that's it, no more liquids for me. It's just so stupid and so human. It's so mindy and ridiculous and sad, and it's not what lifts us up. It's what pushes us down. So, and I get it. I get the pain of betrayal. I get it that you would say, oh, I'll never be vulnerable again, meaning I'll never be woundable. That's what that word means, which means I'll never let anyone in it again. I'll never let anyone get close again.
You
Well,
know, I'm making
can
this
we get the
interesting.
skills so that we can be open, aware, and actively engaged? Can we get the skills in us so that we can take off the armor and know you're going to be hurt? And do that not so that you can be hurt, but so that you can live a full, rich life.
So I have this interesting connection with this idea of, so when you talk about that I think it was you said our mind tells us that we just want to feel good.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of those, you see the t-shirts or the social media memes, like good vibes only, that's like sort of our cultural construct now. And then when you compare that to, well, I dropped the glass of water, that's this punishing, well, you're never going to drink a glass of water again. No, you're not going to quench your thirst. And so it's this punisher thing that is expecting perfectionism, like you can't be human and make a mistake. And so isn't that interesting that these demands are about good vibes only, don't ever make any mistakes. And that means we can't even be human.
Exactly. No, and that yearning, well, you just mentioned another one, that yearning for competence. We were talking about the yearning to feel, but there's a yearning to be competent. Look at your babies, look at your children, and look at how many hours they'll spend just learning how to reach out and pick up an object, or get an object into their mouth, or open up a box, or turn a knob, or put in a button. Does anybody have to say, here's the M&M, and I'll reward you if you do it? No, you come wanting to be competent and learn and to be able to, control your environment and do it effectively. Yeah. But then when the mind gets going, it says, oh, I get it. What you want is you want to be accomplished. And so what you need to do is spring forth from the head of Zeus and have competence without having to go through trial and error, without having to make any mistakes. Well, there's no tennis player who learned tennis that way. There's no podcaster who learned podcasting that way. There's no psychologist. There's nobody who does anything complicated who learned it that way. You didn't learn to walk that way. I mean, you fell down the math on walking. Toddlers walk about the length of 10 football fields, then they fall down 120 times, which means before you learn to walk, you fall down several thousand times. Okay, so let's see if we can maybe shorten the number of times you fall down, but don't be thinking that you're going to learn, for example, these pivoting skills that are in a liberated mind, that you're going to learn them just by, that's not the way it's going to happen. You're going to get competence the way you got it everywhere else, by trial and error, and by guidance, by having coaches, by having people to help, but then coming back and doing it again, coming back and doing it again. I mean, if you have a program and you slip, it isn't like, oh, I'm a failure. I told you I can't do it. No, that's another opportunity to notice the voice within that tells you that you have to start with perfection. That's not how you're going to get there. Thank your mind for trying to solve this problem here. I've got this covered. I know how to stand up and take the next step. And so there's 6 of these, and we went from feeling to competence, and in each case, it's the same thing. The mind gives you the solution that gives you what looks like an outcome, but is a long-term failure. So smaller sooner over larger later. And when we take that same energy and put it in this flexibility process, we're able to kind of achieve what we really wanted anyway. You can get competence, but not by springing forth from the head of Zeus. You're going to get it the way you got it when you learned to walk. So let's do that.
I mean, I just love the word competence as sort of like the sub when we hear that perfectionistic voice, to think of the value as being competence then.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, this has been so good so far. But I thought that some listeners might benefit from just kind of the fundamental brief about ACT, even like, what the letters stand for and generally speaking. So just anything you want to say about that you think of very beginner, they've never heard. They might even look at it and say, oh, is this ACT? Like the ACT test. It is called ACT and it stands for something. So what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, it stands for acceptance and commitment therapy, which are 2 chunks of these pivots. And so ACT uses acceptance and mindfulness processes pivots and commitment and behavior change pivots together to produce psychological flexibility. And what psychological flexibility is being able to come into the present moment consciously with your history. It gives you emotions, bodily sensations that remind you of the past and the present. It gives you thoughts that show up where you can notice and learn from, but not be dictated to or entangled with your internal world of thoughts and feelings. And then in this present moment, consciously direct your attention in a flexible, fluid, and voluntary way towards what brings meaning and purpose into your life by choice. What you want to be about, not what the wagging finger tells you have to be about. What mama wants you to be about. Not what guilt, shame, and blame wants to be. No, between you and the person in the mirror, what am I up to? What do I care about? What do I really want to manifest in my moments? And now let's build habits around that. Let's take advantage of 100 years of behavioral science that says here's how to build habits. And one little freaking step at a time, with repetition and with building it out into larger patterns, create habits of values-based action. Now, even when you're mindless, your habits are your friend. And you're living a life that's values-based. And when you stumble, you come back. How did I get hooked? It's almost always thoughts and feelings. How did they hook me? Okay, I'll learn from that moment. So you notice them, you learn from them, but with a little bit of separation. There's a person noticing this. You're not turning your life over to the dictator within. I want that voice when it tells me you didn't do your taxes. It's April 13th. I want that voice, but I don't want to turn my life over to that voice. It doesn't know how to love. It doesn't know how to be peaceful. It doesn't even know how to look at a sunset without saying it's too pink. And so can I take this kind of wow part of me that knows how to look at a sunset or listen to a crying child and just be there, and then not be overwhelmed by it, but then see what's possible in the present, right here, inside and out, those possibilities, and then build my behavior around the possibilities in those moments, and one step at a time. Be on this journey that we're on together, and not just alone. When you do that, people come to you because they see, wow, they notice your openness, your flexibility, your consciousness. And you bring people to you who are on a similar journey, and these are good people. You don't want to bring people to you who are just going to shame and blame you. Bring people to you who know something about how to be whole and free. And now let's create a culture. Let's do it in our families. Let's do it in our work sites. Let's do it in our churches. Let's do it in our neighborhoods. And it's not fantasy to think that we can turn this. We've turned it over to commercial, judgmental, harsh forces in our culture, and it's killing our kids, literally. We can turn this, but we have to start with ourselves, and then with the groups that we're in, and then with a larger culture. And Liberated Mind actually goes through that whole arc. And the very last chapter is on social transformation, where we're putting ACT into villages in Africa to step up to the Ebola crisis, or to South Sudanese refugees. The World Health Organization has adopted ACT as its model for refugees, and South Sudanese refugees in Uganda. You can put these processes anywhere.
Yeah.
Put them into your podcast. You can put them into your exercise program. You can put them anywhere. So let's take advantage of what Western science has given us of the guidance as to how to build a more flexible way of living, and from that, maybe a more flexible culture, a kinder culture.
Yeah, that really resonates well with me. I mean, social justice has become so important to me. And I'm just... I grew up on WIC, and both my parents hourly workers.
Yeah.
I was like, we didn't do vacations. I mean, I know I had 4 pairs of white socks. I remember counting because I had to do laundry during the week because I couldn't make it a whole school week. You have memories like that. And I mean, thankfully,
Sure.
I'm so grateful for the privileges I've had to get educated and get out of that. Right. But even in my desire to help people and the work that I was doing, it was so blind to social justice issues. It just ignored it. And we're just not in that world anymore. We have, systems and structures take so long to change. So I am 100% with you in that we do what we have the agency over with ourselves first. We talk to our family, our communities, like, because it's conversations, right? And also the people who are in the power in these structures, if they can be using ACT and embracing ACT, right, to change the laws, to
Exactly.
bring that equality back and everything. I mean, we just can't go forward with self-help as usual. We've got to have the awareness of the planet and the world, and that we are all human beings together.
Well, the deepest yearning I had in writing A Liberated Mind was that the policymakers and those who know something about policy and our healthcare systems and our schools and all these other places where we're spending a lot of money to make things happen, and sometimes we're not taking full advantage of what could happen, that they would see that there's a possibility there. And I'm getting a sense, I can kind of feel the little ground trembles, that there's people who know that we need to go in a different direction. And so, we can't just do it by the way we've been going, but we also can't just do it by trusting the next guru or charismatic person or something. Been there, done that. I tell the story in A Liberated Mind of my experience with that in the 60s, and some of these spiritual leaders and stuff like that who are all just fine, but then turned out to have feet of clay, so I don't, and can we do something that's not so unwise, but so it has to be evidence-based, has to be science-based, that's the modern world, but focused on the things that actually liberate us.
Yeah.
As individuals, as families, as communities, as a culture. Can we do that? And, that's a combination that's never been tried before. And we're seeing it happen with the folks trying to pull mindfulness, for example, at its joints and really understand what's in there. ACT is part of that. And why? Because you don't want to just tell people to go to 10-day silent retreats or something, or become some, part of some sangha with that. Come on, that's not going to penetrate Joe's six-pack's world.
Just breathe, damn it. Just breathe.
yeah, exactly. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's just not fully what we need to do. And I've got things in A Liberated Mind that, take you seconds. Can I give you an example of one?
I would love them. You were reading my mind with all, you're answering your own questions, which I love, but I was going to ask for more examples. So please share.
Yeah. Well, let's just take, because we've been talking about shame and the critical voice within and so forth. If a listener could just catch some kind of thought that is pretty old, pretty familiar, and pretty painful, and sometimes really hooks them. I'll give you just a couple or three things to do and just see what happens. So focus in on one of those thoughts, one of those ones that's sort of a finger-wagging thought. And now I want you to say the thought back to yourself in the voice of your least favorite politician.
Not hard to do living in DC.
Or if you don't like the politician thing, do it in Donald Duck's voice or your favorite cartoon character.
Okay, I have it.
If you're thinking a thought like I'm really bad, it can be. How about this? Do this very same thing. Sing it mentally to the tune of Happy Birthday.
You want to hear my thought?
Yeah.
To Happy Birthday.
Can you do it?
Yeah. You don't have your second book yet. You haven't turned in the proposal. You've written 3 of them, and you suck so bad.
That's great. That's great. You remind. I was doing a workshop with a guy, Dennis Church. He's a compassion focused, and he gives me permission to tell the story. And he volunteered for an exercise, and the exercise it's called Passengers on the Bus. It's a classic ACT exercise. And he came up, and I said, well, what are the voices that show up that interfere with doing what you want to do? And I said, well, first, let me ask you, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to write books. Like what? Well, I'm seeing all these clients, I think it's really important. I want to bring compassion into it. So I said, okay, that's cool. And I said, now what are the voices that show up? And their voices just like what you said, of course. There are things, I suck at this. Who am I to do this? Maybe somebody else should. I've never written a book before. I'm not sure. Blah, 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 like that. So in the exercise, what you do is I go to the other side of the room and I say, okay, this is what you want to do with that. And we would work that out. And it was something like making a contribution to people who are suffering. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the value. That's the core thing. I want to be of service. Mm-hmm. I want to be helpful. I care about people. Okay. And I brought volunteers up who were really good at being the voice within. They were ripping them up one side and the other. I mean, who are you to think you, of all people, you are incompetent? My God, you can't even control your own life. How could you possibly write a book and be helpful to others? Why don't you go back to school? Maybe if you were smarter, you would, et cetera, et cetera. And so the way it works is we do a little thing where I bring the person in the voice, but now in the form of an actual person. And I say, listen to this. Is this what it's like? And we'll actually do a little coaching so he gets it exactly right. What do you want to do with this person? Oh, I want to just fight with him. I want to argue with him. I say, okay, argue with him. And of course, as you argue, it gets louder. So I say, well, what else do you want to do? I want to make him go away. I say, okay, here, we'll make him go away. And I just turn him so he's focused away from where the values are. Mm-hmm. How about if you just another Netflix movie might do it, it goes away, but you're not on that journey. So the final episode is, I'm sorry for the long story, but
I love it.
This will land. The final version, you can imagine doing it. You can even get with your friends and try this if people are listening. You now walk that journey. I'm in the other room and I'm standing for contributing to others. But you've invited the voices to come with you. Thank you very much. Why don't you get behind me and you can let me know? And so you've got this funny kind of image of a person. The metaphor is like driving a bus with passengers on there, stinky and wearing bad clothes, and they're scary looking, or they haven't shaved, and they're saying, "You can't do this. You can't do this." And he's just walking across the room. Well, here's the punchline. You go look at it. Dennis has now written something like 7 books.
Oh, geez.
And he goes back and says, the pivot point was that I was going to take my voices with me. And I'm going to write this. I've got stuck on my wall over here, a quote from Brene Brown, which says something like, I'm not sure I'm able. And underneath those are the words, and this is the process. How can we carry our voices without our voices carrying us away? Because how many books are not written? How many relationships are not formed? How many new, innovative, wonderful things are not done? Because some freaking voice said, you're not able. I mean, just the people listening to us right now are like a force in the world. If they could find a way to carry their voices with them. And we are poorer because of it. But I don't know what their contribution is, but I'll know by the culture itself moving. And so is there enough love in the world? Is there enough caring in the world to solve the world's problems? I don't know, but let's get out of our own way enough to find out.
Yeah. And I think it's also an issue of trying to use our sense of agency, working with our mind to take action on things that we can and keep trying and practicing and sitting with it while we hold space for the fact that there are really things that are unjust in society. There are lots of problems to fix, right? Because it's like yes and, right? So if the problems of the world make it so that we're staying stuck ourselves, then we would be in that rigidity mindset, right? And what we're trying to do is be flexible. And so, I just noticed that a lot too. Like we talked about the value of negative emotions. It's spending time knowing that there are big, major problems in the world. We've discussed, several of those together. And at the same time, knowing that it's okay to learn and grow and create our own better life while we still care about the bigger problems of the world. And in fact, and I think where you're getting at with the spirituality and the common humanity elements is that maybe there's a sort of a mass numbers. The more of us who are able to learn and practice this and do this, we can also create change and liberate our own minds, liberate others. Is that the overall message?
It is. And I think we can do it in a more precise way if
Sure.
we know something about the science that is applicable. And if it's true, and I think it is, if you read that book, you'll see, because I give myself that challenge. I even tell the reader, this is a challenge. You'll decide at the end of the book. If it's true that this is the 20% that does the 80% on the basis of actual evidence, as you learn the things in one area, they can apply it in another area. So there's really good studies showing that for the first time ever, let's take an example, the Me Too issue. For the first time ever, we're able to, by working with perpetrators, using ACT as compared to some of the things that were already out there, the Duluth model, traditional CBT, reduce actual violence by perpetrators. And where do we start? No shame, no blame, responsibility. It's a crime. And often these times, these folks who themselves were abused. You get that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Totally.
that doesn't excuse it. I'm not saying, oh, poor dears. I'm saying don't be thinking that judgment and more shame is going to solve what is the side effects of some of these very same processes. So in the same way, whether it's climate change or domestic violence or the things that we care about socially, can we liberate the energy that we have to bring those values to it and by focusing on the processes, when Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life first hit, and it beat Harry Potter for that glorious week, it was my 15 minutes of fame. It was written up in time. It was all great. And I got the most hateful emails. And one of them that penetrated me was, you're just saying accept it because you're part of the elite who was oppressing the people, and you're saying accept your fate instead of your. Well, fortunately, the very first big study done after I went through this period of working out the model and so forth, took almost 15 years doing it, was with bank workers who we worked on stress in the banks. And we compared it to a condition where take charge of your environment, change the stressors in your environment, etc., versus an ACT approach, but without specific behavioral directives to do anything with your work environment. Well, here's what was interesting. By follow-up, the ACT folks were changing their environment more than the folks who are actually being taught to change their environment. And the folks who were just taught to change their environment as a way forward didn't get any benefits in terms of reduced stress and increased mental health. So it is not acceptance in this passive, I just sit and accept it. No, it's like the things that keep you in that little cage, that keep you from going to the foreman, or they keep you from organizing with coworkers, or they keep you from, stepping forward into a Me Too situation, is that the painful emotional process you're going to have to walk through to do that. But if you are empowered to do that and others see that you're empowered to do that, they may walk that journey with you. And so, yeah, let's do something about the stressful work environment, but let's do it out of this place that also teaches us the skills that'll help us when we're dealing with problems in our relationships or difficulties with our children, or when we're stepping up to the fact that we had an abuse history that we're going to have to show up to. And that, so that we stop the perpetration that goes on. I mean, take the example, just quick thing of the Me Too things. One of the common side effects of that is alexithymia. People who've been sexually abused start dampening down the painful emotions as a way of coping. And eventually they don't even know when they're feeling things. It's called alexithymia. You can't notice it and describe it.
Right.
It's that sunset mode of mind brought not to a sunset, but to a crying child. You no longer are able to observe and describe your own tears, your own fears, your own pain. Yeah. What does that predict? It predicts further abuse. That's what it predicts. The last people on the planet who should ever have that happen again are now at increased risk of happening again. because the mind told him the solution was suppression. But there's a wiser part of us that knows how to lift our head up, open our eyes, and put our hands out, even with painful things. And that allows us to read the situation better, not go home with that guy who's unsafe, to work with your sisters and your brothers about doing something about a culture that allows this level of abuse to occur, and to bring those perpetrators back who themselves have been perpetrated on. If you see what I'm saying?
Oh, 1,000,000%. You're using a specific example for what I was talking about that holding the room for two things. Like, so how do you help the victim not fall in the trap that increases her or his, right, like risks again in an individual way where ACT could be used. And also we need to work with our fellow humans to fix the system.
Exactly.
To create a better world.
Enough is enough. And judgment and wagging fingers, shame and blame ain't going to be a solution. Some of that's the part of the problem. We're going to have to be wiser with ourselves and wiser with our friends and wiser in the culture. And science can help, and A Liberated Mind walks you through, I think, the best overall organized, biggest set of data out there on this kind of a journey. And I'm sorry for the prideful.
No, you should be proud. Remember,
I'm speaking for a whole community. I'm not speaking just for me and my grand studies. I'm not the best researcher on the planet, but we've done something as a worldwide community that is worth attention by the policymakers and folks, but also just by ordinary folks, by Joe Sixpack, just by people who are suffering and living a human life. How can we create prosperity out of pain?
Yep. It reminds me of Desmond Tutu, my humanity is bound in yours, for we can only be human together. And I see that.
Exactly.
Right. And I
it's
just
awesome message.
Feel that with ACT is that's, we have a common humanity, and we can create big, significant changes within ourselves, our families, and our communities. So once again, the book is A Liberated Mind, How to Pivot Toward What Matters. Stephen Hayes, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Where can folks, we know we can get the book everywhere. Where can they find you if they want to follow your good work? And also, I mentioned at the beginning that you do train clinicians in a virtual program and you have a newsletter. So what's the best way people can
If they go to my
you?
website, it's just my name, StephenCHayes.com, Stephen with a V, middle initial C, HAYES.com. And, I don't spam people, but if you want to be on my newsletter and all that, I'll do that and let you know what I'm up to, send you my blogs, that are out there. But, also people should know that there's a whole lot of written stuff. If you've got a specific problem, there's something like 150 self-help books on ACT now. And, I may have lit the match, but I didn't create the bonfire. Oh. So there's a lot of hands involved with this. And I call myself a co-developer, even if I'm the originator. And, there's a whole lot of people like yourself. Who are contributing their voices. So there's lots of other things out there. If you just, once you became aware of it and look around, you'll see that it's everywhere. But for me, particularly, StephenCHayes.com. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. And I'm definitely a fan, and absolutely, I didn't know it when I got my first book deal that I didn't even have the name Body Kindness, but it's a lot of my personal journey is how I even got to that. And ACT, like I said in the beginning, it fundamentally helped me put these layers between health and well-being and creating meaningful change, not just following the checklist. So thank you so much. It was such a joy to talk to you.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. It was just a joy to dance with you here. It was a fun, wasn't it? It kind of had a flowing quality, and I know you created that. Thank you for that, and I hope the listeners benefited.
And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? Visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.